Good afternoon, everybody. Today is going to be a review. Tomorrow, you're going to have a test. So, I need you to have out your Chromebook, pencil, and get a calculator. And then also, Mr. Barrier is going to give you a piece of plain paper and a worksheet. So, make sure you get everything out. And once you open up your Chromebook, make sure you log on to what's in the green box. Quiz 1 practice for Unit 7 P2. Quiz 1 practice for Unit 7 P2. And we're going to be going back and forth between your plain piece of paper for Otis and the worksheet. So, Mr. Barrier, if you just want to hit pause and let everybody get everything together and start the video again once we're all set. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is use your plain piece of paper. We're going to go on Otis. We're going to do item number 1 in Otis. So on your paper, copy down the problem. And then you have to read the directions on this test. This one says solve by factoring. So we're going to fill in our hidden one. We're going to draw a magic X. We're going to draw a box. Remember, this is the front of your box. This is the back of your box. And we multiply the front and the back number for positive 21. These are the two numbers we focus on for our magic X. And you ask yourself, what multiplies to 21? It should be 1 and 21, or 3 and 7. Which set would give you negative 10? So we need 7x and 3x. That would be positive 10, so we need both negatives for negative 10. And then that's what goes in our box. And then we'll do the outside of our box. X times x is x squared. Going across, x times negative 3 is 3x. And going up and down, x times negative 7 is negative 7x. So now we've rewritten our equation in factored form. We'll write the outsides of the box. And now we have to solve for x, so we have an extra step to do. So you're going to set each factor equal to 0. So set each factor equal to 0, and then we will solve for x, and we'll be done. So draw a line through equals. When you're solving an equation, you do opposites. So add 3 underneath negative 3 to both sides. Cross it out. X is equal to 3, so we have one of our answers. And do the opposite on x minus 7 equals 0, so add 7. And x would equal positive 7, so enter 7 into Otis. Okay, if you want to just hit pause for a minute, Mr. Barrier, let them get this entered and written down. Okay, now I want you to switch over, and I want you to go to your worksheet to do number 1 and number 2. It says solve by factoring. So same way, you're going to go ahead and use the magic X in your box. Remember to multiply the front and the back for 40. And right down here, I've listed from your factor product chart everything that multiplies to 40. And on number 2, multiply front and back for negative 26. And down at the bottom is everything that multiplies to 26. Okay, Mr. Barrier, if you want to go ahead and hit pause It's going to take them 5 or 10 minutes to finish this, and then restart the video after they're all done. Okay, here's the answers to the worksheet for solve by factoring. So take a look at your work. For number 1, you should have gotten x equals 10 and x equals 4. And for number 2, you should have gotten x equals -2, x equals 13. If you want to hit pause, Mr. Barrier, so that they can take a look at this in case they had any errors, they can find them and correct them. When everybody's ready, go ahead and start the video again. Okay, so the next one we're going to switch back to Otis. So I need you to go to Otis and your regular piece of paper. We're going to do item number 2. You want to read the directions. It says solve for x using square roots. You're going to write down the problem. And the first thing you want to do is remember to work PEMDAS backwards when you're solving. Go this way. So first, find anything that can be added or subtracted. Draw a line through equals always, and -15, the opposite, would be to add 15 to both sides. And then bring down your whole problem. The equal sign, and 60 plus 15 is 75. Okay, so we're done with add and subtract in PEMDAS. So now next you want to check for multiply and divide. And in between 3 and the quantity x plus 2 squared is a multiply dot. So we're going to divide on both sides to undo that multiplication. So 3 divided by 3 cancels to a hidden 1. And 75 divided by 3 is 25. The next step is to take square roots on both sides. Don't forget to add plus or minus on the right side when you take square roots. All right, when you take square roots on the both sides, that removes the parenthesis and the exponent, and out pops just x plus 2. And on the right side, we can do the square root of 25. There's a pair of 5s in there, so it's plus or minus 5. So you need to reduce the square root. And now we just have to solve for x, which means we have to do opposites. So we have +2, we're going to subtract 2. And when you subtract 2 here, make sure it goes in front of the plus or minus sign. So 2 minus 2 is 0. X will be equal to -2 plus or minus 5, which gives us 2 answers. So -2 plus 5, which equals 3, and -2 minus 5, which equals -7. So there's 2 answers built into one. That's what the plus or minus sign stands for. So our answers here are 3 and -7 for Otis. So Mr. Barry, if you want to just hit pause here for a minute in case students need to get caught up and finish their work. Hit pause for just a second. Okay. So now I want you to go ahead and do 2 problems on the worksheet. So go ahead and switch over to the worksheet and do number 3 and number 4. And the directions again say solve by using square roots. Mr. Barrier, if you want to hit pause, this is going to take the students 5 or 10 minutes to finish. Please hit pause until everyone's done with these 2 problems. Okay, here's the answers to solve by using square roots. The answer to number 3 came out to be x equals 8, x equals 4. And the answer to number 4 is x equals -2, x equals -8. And Mr. Barrier, if you just want to go ahead and hit pause here and give the students enough time to find their error or a step that they might have missed, and then restart the video as soon as everybody's ready to move on. Okay, so I need you to switch back to your regular piece of paper and to Otis. We're going to do item number 3 on Otis. The directions here say solve by completing the square. So on your plain piece of paper, go ahead and write down the problem. And the little steps that you need to remember here are to take half of it, square it, and then add it to both sides. When you're done with that, you're going to take square roots on both sides and add plus or minus. To solve. Okay? So try and remember this. It's a good way to remember what you're doing with complete the square. So you always go to the number in front of x. So we're going to go to 14. We're going to take half of it. That means divide by 2. And square it. Means write the little exponent of 2. So that will be 7 squared. 7 times 7 is 49. And then we're going to add it to both sides. So now I'm going to write this whole original problem out with the add it on both sides. So x squared plus 14x plus 49, add 49, and then negative 32, add 49. And now quickly on this left side here, I'm going to factor. So if you multiply front and back, what multiplies to 49 and gives you 14? That would be 7 and 7. So now I'm going to change this into my 2 parentheses, and you can use a box if you want. But you notice that they're both the same number. So we can kind of just quickly fill in x plus 7, and then actually do this math. 49 take away 32 is 17. So take half of it, square it, add it to both sides. We're going to get it into a form that we can go ahead and take square roots on both sides. And don't forget to add plus or minus. Okay, when we take the square root, the parentheses and the square root symbol go away, and out pops x plus 7. And now we just need to solve. We need to subtract 7 on both sides. And make sure it goes in front of that plus or minus sign. for x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus radical 17. And that is what we're going to enter into Otis. So enter your fraction. Oh, sorry. There's no fraction here. I thought there was a fraction. So just enter negative 7 plus or minus square root 17 as your answer into Otis. Mr. Barrier, if you can hit pause for just a minute until the students get that entered into Otis. They may need a minute to find that plus or minus key inside Otis. And then if you can restart the video once they're ready. Okay, so now I want you to go to your worksheet. To do number 5 and number 6. Solve by complete the square. And remember, maybe you need to write this down. Take half of it, square it, and then add it to both sides. And then we factor. And then at the end, we solve with square roots and add the plus or minus. So this is something one way to study for the test is maybe to write this down a couple of times, because you do have to have that memorized for when you do the problem for solve, complete the square. Okay, Mr. Barrier, this may take them a good 10 or 15 minutes to finish all the way up. Can you please hit pause until the class is done with number 5 and number 6 examples? Thank you. Okay, here's the answers for number 5 and number 6. For number 5, it's x equals negative 8 plus or minus square root 13. And for number 6, it's x equals 5 plus or minus square root 29. And Mr. Barrier, if you can hit pause here and give the students a chance to look at this in case they made an error so that they can find and correct their work. And as soon as everybody's ready, then just go ahead and start the video again. Okay, this is going to be the last question. It's on Otis. Please switch back to Otis. Okay, so this is being able to match these words, factoring, square roots, completing the square, and quadratic formula, to the way the problems look on these cards below. So I think probably one of the easiest ones is the square root. It would be this card here. This is where we worked PEMDAS backwards, right? So we added 33 right here. Then we divided by a 5. And you can kind of tell because it's the longest problem. So this card, whoops, let me just erase that. So this yellow card would go up for square roots. Okay. So let's look at another one. So the one that says equals negative 31, that's the only other card that doesn't say equal to 0. And when it's equal to a number, we'll just make sure I have a pen. That's where we're going to add it to both sides. So in other words, we would be taking half a negative 12, squaring it for negative 6. and having 36 being adding it to both sides. So that's how I would remember for completing the square, is it has equal to a number. It's a shorter problem in comparison to this is really long. This is really short, just your A and B pieces there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put this box up for complete the square. Now, how do you know the difference here? We have factoring, which is your magic X in your box. How do you know the difference between that and the quadratic formula? Well, you can just check, see if you can factor or not. So if we try to multiply front and back here for 34, 2 times 17 is 34 for our magic X. Well, it multiplies to 34 and gives us the middle number of 13. Well, 1 and 34, oops, not 32, sorry. 1 and 34 and 2 times 17 are the two ways to multiply, and neither gives us that 13. So this problem cannot be factored. This one has a hidden 1, so 1 times 8 is 8. What multiplies to an 8 positive and gives us negative 9? Is that possible? Sure. Negative 8x and negative 1. X would give us a negative 9. So this one we can factor. Okay, so that's how you tell the difference between factoring and quadratic formula. One you can factor and one you can't. So this would be factoring and this would be quadratic formula. Okay, so if you need to review this video is going to be posted on Google Classroom. So you can always go back and re-listen to how we told the difference between these four problems. And then how can you study for tomorrow's test? So like I said, the video is on Google Classroom. You can re-listen and redo some or all of the problems again tonight because the test is tomorrow. And just use a new piece of paper. You already have all the work there that you can glance at if you forget a step. You can redo any Otis problems and recheck your answers in Otis. And then you can also come to lunch tutoring tomorrow, Wednesday, for extra help from me. Okay? All right. Thank you, you guys. Thank you, Mr. Barrier.